So let's talk about personal and professional branding. Hopefully, this is something that you haven't thought about before. And if you have ever interacted with me or been to any of my workshops, this is something that I talk about very often is how do you understand what other people think of you in relation to what you think of yourself? And what does that mean for your career? So today what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about your brand. We're going to create some parameters around it. And we're going to talk about how your brand influences not only those perceptions for people of you, but also how your brand plays a role in your career and where you want to take your career and who you want to work for. So let's start off and I want you to take a moment and click pause on this video. And I want you with a piece of paper to write the answers to the following 5 simple questions. 1, what adjectives would people use to describe you? Just jot down a bunch of words. Try to give at least 5. 2, what is your personal style or look? So when people see you walking in the room, how do they describe you? What would they say? Chic, stylish, casual, formal, messy, pristine? Third question, do you have any quirks, behaviors, or mannerisms? So are you a person that speaks a lot with their hands? Do you talk a lot? Are you a quiet person? Do you fidget? Are you distracted? Are you intense? Are you somebody that looks people directly in the eye, almost to the point that it's too much? Tell me about it. What is your biggest passion? What would people say is your biggest passion? And so outwardly looking in, is somebody going to say, Greg really loves animals. He's really passionate about animals. What would they say? And then what would people say is your biggest fault? If somebody ever was complaining about you, what would they say? If somebody was ever going to give you critical feedback, what is something that they would point out? Now pause this video and take about 5 minutes. I want you to answer these questions and then come back. I'll be here waiting. So now that you've done that, and hopefully you just clicked play again and you just didn't breeze through this, what do you think? What do you think of your list? What do you think of the words that you have for the adjectives people would use to describe you? And your look. Often it's really hard to understand who we are and what our brand is when we are reflecting upon ourselves. There's an interesting thing. It's a really interesting phenomenon. And it's about how we view ourselves in the mirror. And the way it works is, let me just give you a scenario. Have you ever, when getting ready to go out, you want to look nice, you're looking in the mirror, you're fixing your hair, you're putting on a nice outfit, maybe you put on some makeup, and you look at yourself in the mirror, you're like, I look good. I like this. I look great. I like how I look. And then later on that evening, somebody takes a picture of you and you look at this picture and you're like, oh my gosh, why do I look so different? And how this phenomenon actually works is it's because your brain is so used to looking at yourself in the mirror and it's seeing a mirrored image of yourself that when you take a picture, it's actually a different image. It's not a mirrored image of yourself. And your brain is confused because it's like, that's not how I look when I see myself in the mirror. Who is that other person? Why do I look so different? And that's the same concept with your brand. Because your brand it's more than how you describe yourself. What are people saying about you? And who do you want to be? But outward looking in, When somebody talks about you, what are things that they associate with you? There's a TV show maybe you've watched called The Office. And I think a lot of those characters are great examples. And if you haven't watched the TV show The Office of, Jim and Dwight and Michael, you can think of any other TV show. Think about the TV shows, how they are able to build a brand for each character. So that way, when you're thinking of Dwight in The Office, you know what he's thinking. You know what he's going to do. You know what he's interested in. You know what he's passionate about. And so you can understand how he works. And so when you're thinking of your own brand, you kind of have to think of it like that. The TV shows are great because they actually put somebody's brand and their persona on blast. So that way you 100% know what they're about, what their character's about. And you have to almost think of that for yourself. How can you express your brand so that way when you are thinking of what you want your brand to be, that you are in many ways making sure that it's on blast going out so that other people know who you are? Because I can tell you what you don't want is for the brand that you have inside of you, for who you think you are, to be very different than the brand that other people have of you. I have firsthand been in positions where I had this concept of who I was. And then somebody who I respected professionally told me, hey, I'm seeing this other brand. And it was a wonderful wake up call. It was back when I was in grad school and my supervisor sat me down and was like, hey, this is how we're thinking. And that made me realize how important it is to understand the relationship between the brand you think you have, the brand you want to have, and what other people see. And when we talk about branding, you have to admit that, when branding is done well, when somebody is able to really showcase their brand, people get it. People have thoughts and emotions. Think of this. When you see this logo, what do people say about this? What do you think about this brand? Or when you see this, again, what are people thinking about this brand? What are people, remembering about this? What experiences do people have that are attached to this brand? Again, keep thinking about it. What do people have attached to this brand? When they see this logo, what do they think about? These companies using their brand is a great example because most of these companies are very focused on defining their brand, of creating this persona of an organization to represent who they are. So that way people can recognize them. People know, when I was shopping for Christmas presents and I wanted to get good quality homemade items that support small businesses, I went to Etsy. And when I want to go see a great movie and I see something's coming out from Disney, 9 times out of 10, I know that the movie that I'm going to see is going to be something that I enjoy. And when I buy a phone, if I want something that I know is going to look great, it's going to work, I'm going to go to Apple for me. Branding is essential because it helps others know who you are. So let's say, now, what would people say about you? What do people say about you? This is a hard question because often in our society, we have to seek out critical feedback. It's much easier to say negative things about a person when they're not there than to say it to their face. And as you grow professionally, you got to seek out this feedback. You got to know, what is my brand to other people? Because your brand really is everything that makes you who you are. It's the middle point between how others see you. So, what is their viewpoint of you and how you see yourself combined? It's always somewhere in the middle. As you go out professionally, you need to realize how important these two dynamics are. Many of you are going to be interviewing for jobs very soon. And the funny thing, and if you've ever sat at the other side of a table when you're interviewing someone, and I've done interviews, it's interesting because the brand somebody sells is often how they see themselves. And I've been in those situations where we hire someone or we bring somebody in who they saw themselves as this as something, and we bring them in and we hire them, and it's completely different. And it's not always a negative difference. Sometimes it's the fact that the person undersold themselves. They were very modest in their interview, and they come in, and here I've got this person that's completely different, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's different. It's hard. It's an adjustment for me as an employer. Or let's say, for example, I've hired people before that come in and they say, and you interview them, and it's just like, oh my gosh, like this person is absolutely fantastic. And I bring them in, and I'm just, where is the person that I interviewed? You said you were very organized. You said that you are a team player. And here I have this other person who I don't know who they are. And honestly, I don't know how they fit in the organization. And so you have to really think about this. I think a good way to start is to go out with your friends, or to find somebody that you admire, or a supervisor or a professor, and kind of just sit down and say, lay it out on me. What do you think about me? And listen to their feedback. Don't get defensive. Don't try to explain yourself, because again, by explaining yourself and getting defensive, that's where how you see yourself is starting to conflict with how others see you. Just listen. And then take that information back with you, and then compare it to what you would put down for yourself, and see what that picture looks like, and explore your identity and reflect on, do you like your brand? If you do like your brand, that's awesome. If you don't like your brand, that's okay. Because now and then it's time for you to sit down and reflect on, where is this disconnect in how others see you and how you see yourself. So often when we talk about brands, we think of, much of it on a scale, on professionalism as being a scale. And so it's very complex. And I think these are interesting dynamics. And the unfortunate truth is, often when people are reflecting on this, the scale usually teeters. If it's, even though you may be in the middle, if you're over 50% in one direction, it goes that way. But think of yourself in this way. And so sit down and evaluate. Are you perceived as hardworking, or are you lazy? Organized, or are you unorganized? Professional, or are you unprofessional, casual? Are you a team player, or are you not very collaborative? Maybe you prefer to be a little bit more of a solo artist. Are you dedicated, or are you a little ambivalent? Are you friendly, or can you be a little mean? Now, don't think of this as circle one or the other, because I think all of us are somewhere on this scale. But when people are sometimes trying to make a snap decision about you, they tilt the scale in one way, whichever way it was leaning most. So you have to really be careful. because other people's perception of you is often made on experiences they had with you or things they've heard about you. And you have to really keep reflecting on what are those perceptions. Because sometimes, let's say, for example, you're in a group project and it's just a bad week and you just didn't have time for that group project. And so you had a teammate who that's the only time they've ever worked with you is that group project. And you just were not a really good team player. You just had a lot going on. Unfortunately, their perception, based on that one time, is their interpretation of your brand. And so you really have to be aware of your brand at all times when you're working with people or when you're interacting. The unfortunate truth is that we live in a social media age where it's easy to find people and to understand who you're connected with, mutual acquaintances. And let's say you apply for a job and you submit your resume, you submit a wonderful cover letter. Always submit a cover letter with a resume, just so you know. People always forget that. I digress. And then you have your references. Now, when I look at somebody's references, I know for the most part, those people have been pre-approved, vetted. They're probably going to speak very highly of a candidate. But I also know I can go on LinkedIn. I can search this candidate. I can find them, their current employer. And I can also find on LinkedIn or Facebook, maybe a mutual acquaintance. You know, I work in higher education and student affairs, and it's a field, it's a big field, but it's not huge. And the fact that I usually can find at least one person that knows someone that I'm looking up in the field. And what if that person, that one person that we share as a mutual connection, knows a candidate that I'm interviewing and had a bad experience? Maybe one that was in grad school, maybe one that was 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And I reach out to that mutual acquaintance and I say, what do you know about so-and-so? As they reflect, they may go back to these professionalism characteristics and they're going to make those snap judgments. Your brand is almost a lifelong process. And how you define that brand comes in so many forms of your persona, of your identity, of how you talk to people, how you interact with people, how you treat people. What is your work ethic? What is your work ethic on every project? Have you ever let somebody down? What are your positions on certain things? What are you knowledgeable about? What have you achieved? Where are you going in life? What are you wanting to achieve? What is your mission? Do you know your mission? Do you know your personal statement? What are your core values? If you feel overwhelmed by everything that I'm saying and everything that you're seeing on this page, it is because to truly understand your personal brand, it is very overwhelming. How do I defend myself when somebody's perception of my brand is the old me? And really, it comes down to just understanding how your brand is continually evolving and shaping. And then for the brand that you currently have, how do you put it as if it's a band on your sleeve so that no matter where you go, people see your brand? One way that I educate on my brand is through personal statements on LinkedIn. You know, I have a mission that I share with people that I know. If somebody in an elevator asks me, Greg, what do you do? Who are you? Tell me about yourself. I have a carefully crafted message to give them because I know that I have to put my brand on blast so that way people see me and are able to understand immediately what my brand is. Because I want them to hear my brand from me and then to be able to then interpret that in their own way rather than to maybe go to somebody else and ask them about my brand. That's where it can get a little scary. And I think it's also important that you start dismantling your brand into its various components. I like to start thinking about the first thing that people see when they understand your brand is your external brand. What people see looking at you, interacting with you externally. And so this could be everything from identifiable characteristics, which aren't necessarily bad. These aren't, don't look at these things as bad versus good, but what kind of hair do you have? What kind of clothing do you wear? What is your style? That tells people a lot about you. It's a part of your brand. How do you act? What are your behaviors? What are your actions? When they see you and you interact with them at first, how does that define you for who you are? What are the things that you say? How do you say it? I've often been told that I'm a very loud person. And this is a disconnect in my brand because I always respond to people, no, I know how to enunciate and project my voice, but my brand is part of that. What is your body language? Have you thought about that? When somebody sees you sitting there, what can they tell about you? Do you look people in the eye? Do you look down? When you're walking around, do you look at your feet? Do you look up? Are you distracted? Do you seem uninterested? Do you have a closed body language or do you have an open body language? The first thing people usually notice of your brand is this external brand. And so you need to make sure that this external brand that you have is one that matches you for who you are. Because the unfortunate thing is that an external brand, they may just make these assumptions without even asking you, what your style is. And I think also connected to that is exploring your inner brand and how that influences people's perceptions of you. And so these are, things that you love. Because I think your internal brand is a good way to start exploring how you can show your internal brand externally. And so this goes back to, what are your hobbies? What are you passionate about? I recently was asked to compete in UMB's little talent show, and I played the piano. And that was one of the first times I've actually ever played for coworkers, and I was really proud. I actually got second place. And I was able to showcase, I knew this was an opportunity for me to showcase my internal brand because I love music. Also, part of your internal brand is your personal and professional goals. I think it's important for you to be able to speak about these goals. Tell people what your 5-year plan is for both your life and your career. Because this influences people's perception of who you are. My professional goal right now, and for many people that know me, and probably for the same thing for you all, is to get my doctorate, to finish my education, to be Dr. Brightbill. This is my professional goal. I share with people this about myself because I want them to understand my brand and where I'm going and where I want to go. What is your history and experiences? So it's more than just looking at your resume, but what does your resume say about you? What does your history of employment say about you? It's important to think, the steps we make in life say a lot about us. The moves we take in our career really shine about what we're interested in, the career that we're interested in, the experiences that I have, the volunteering that I've done, the organizations that I've worked with. This tells people this is who I am. These are things that I'm passionate about. These are internal. I need to make sure people understand understanding my journey and how that represents who I am. Also, what are your personal values? If you have never sat down and written out your personal values, what are your 5 top values? I think you're missing a great opportunity to understand yourself And then by understanding yourself and your own personal values, you're able to share those with other people. My values are honesty, respect, and commitment. And I think those are important for myself, for people that I work with. And I want people to know when they're working with me, this is who I am based on those three values. If you want to take that one step further, again, do you know what your mission is? If you had to write your own mission statement or a vision statement, if you haven't already written one, do it. If you've gone to some of my other workshops, I probably have made you do one, because it's a really great way for you to reflect on who you are and share it with other people. And then finally, something we don't often think about, but we do, is what is your personality like? Your personality is a part of your internal brand, but how people perceive your personality can be very different. You know, my personality is that I am a very relational person. I really love connecting with people. I love meeting new people. I love interacting with individuals. Uh, the best thing about my job is meeting students, and I meet hundreds of students each year, and in the classes I come to, and the programs that I lead. And so that's my personality, and hopefully, people through working and engaging with me are able to start seeing my personality. Another aspect of your brand that I think we don't often reflect upon is your written brand. Through your resumes, your CVs, and your cover letters, your published articles, your correspondences and emails, and the things you put on social media. Your written brand tells a lot about you, and it actually tells more than what is said in the words that you write, but maybe your tone, how you interact written, or interact through a written format. You know, one thing, and I review a lot of resumes, and one thing that I often say is look beyond what you're saying in your resume to how you're saying it. And with that, how are you organizing your writing? I've looked at a lot of resumes and cover letters and articles and emails and social media posts where I know what the person's trying to say, but I cannot get to what they're trying to say because of the glaring typos or organizational issues. And now, if that is how you are, maybe you're like, well, Greg, that's who I am. Well, that's great, but does it match the brand that you're trying to sell? And so you got to understand how these really do, especially in the job application phase, sell your brand to people who have never met you before. I often tell people, your interview starts before the interview starts. And what that means is that from the moment that you send your application in to the emails you respond to, if they say, hey, we'd love to schedule an interview, if you say in response, like, awesome, that's cool, can't wait, and you didn't email a response that was correct, or that was full of grammatical issues, or let's say you were not very polite with the person that emailed you, this all plays into their perception of your brand. And speaking of social media, and you all have gone to the other workshop, I had another one on social media presence, and so you've gotten all that. But again, when you think of your brand, you have to think about, what does your social media say about you? Because this has now become a huge component of people's identities. What is your online identity? Speaking of LinkedIn, I have looked up people, I help friends and I review resumes, as I said, and I often review LinkedIn's, and I've talk to friends like, oh, you're looking for a job. You're out on the hunt. Have you looked at your LinkedIn lately? And they're like, no. I'm like, well, what does it look like? And I pull it up for them and it's half filled out. What does that say about a person? How does that influence my perception of their brand? The good news is that I know them already, but how would that be influenced by an employer who doesn't know them? And looking at their online paper trail of what have they published about, what have they written about, what is the content of their writing, what are they tagged in when you Google them? This tells you a lot about a person, whether they want that to be said or not. And that's how employers do a lot of research on employees. The vast majority of employers now do Google employees before an interview. They Google candidates because they're trying to figure out who this person is. Do they really work at this company? Well, on their resume, it says they're the director of strategic initiatives and outsourcing, or the CEO of effectiveness. But on their resume, it says something different. Who is this person? How does this difference impact my perception of their brand? The important thing when you're thinking about your brand is as you reflect on it, I think at a certain point, we should all be comfortable with our brand. And that means we've explored how other people perceive us and how we want to be perceived. And then we sit down and we look at whatever that is in the middle that is your brand. And hopefully at a certain point, you're comfortable with it and you like it. And then I would take as a next step of exploring how that brand matches your career, of where you want to work. Your brand versus an organization's culture is a big deal. Now, a culture, let's talk about what is a culture of an organization. A culture is in many ways the same as their brand. But a culture is really like the influx of their vision and values, the work environment, and the practices and the people. And all of this comes into play. If you are trying to find a place to work and you really started reflecting on your brand, you need to make sure that your brand and their culture line up. I think this is a cute little animated. It's square peg, round hole. If you Google square peg, round hole, it brings up this one wonderful little critter. I have seen this play out quite a bit, where somebody has their brand figured out, and then they come into an organization with a very different culture, and they don't fit. And let's say, for example, they want to wear jeans on Friday, and the organizational culture is like, absolutely not. We are a suit and tie every day. I think it's important to not only reflect what is your brand, but also what is the culture of the organization that you want to work for, and what is the relationship between your brand and that cultural brand of the organization. Because sometimes you may say, nope, they're too different. That organization isn't for me. I know my brand. I know my style, and I don't want to work for them. Or you may be like, this is my dream job, but I look at their organizational culture and they are a very casual organization, and here I am wearing suits every day. So then, if I want to work with them, I need to look at, how do I match my brand to them? How do I adjust my brand? I often have conversations with students about, don't view every aspect of your brand as good versus bad. That formal versus casual brand difference. I have been told that I tend to be a more formal person in the way that I dress. Of course, people see me and I have this style that I'm trying to sell, this brand that I have. I have a bunch of ties in my office, blazers in my office, and if I have an important meeting with somebody, I usually throw on a tie or a blazer. My husband works for a tech company, and he works from home every day. And of course, now I work from home a lot, but he wears sweatpants. And the people that he interacts with through the meetings and the Zoom meetings, he sees the CEO wearing a t-shirt and workout clothing. And he often says, I would never want to work for a company that makes me wear a tie. Whereas me, I'm like, I'm fine with that. So it's about exploring your brand and where you want to work. And just like how my husband would probably not want to work for the University of Maryland, Baltimore, I don't know how I would respond working at his company, because I probably would come in and my brand would be completely different. And because of that difference, people may not connect well with me. They may say, Greg's kind of stuffy. He dresses too nice. He's not casual enough for me. Often students that I talk to about interviewing for jobs, they say, okay, well, Greg, but okay, cool. I know my brand. I'm comfortable with my brand. How do I find out an organization's brand, their culture? Well, I think it starts off with just look up their mission and their vision. Find out on their website what they say about themselves. The University of Maryland, Baltimore has a vision and a mission statement. And we also have core values. This tells me a lot about what they want their culture to be. And I look at their values and I recognize a lot of them are values that I hold. I see the university's core value of diversity, and I also uphold that as something that I think is very important. And so I connect myself to it and I say, oh, okay, I'm cool with their culture, their brand. Another great way is look up customer and employee reviews. Glassdoor and all of the other review sites give you a really unique insight into an organization's culture. Now, unfortunately, just like with Yelp, the only people that are, for the most part, the only time people are energized to write a review is if they have had a negative experience. So you got to take that into consideration. But I used to have an employer, and I worked for them for several years, and I'm not going to say their name, and they paid me horribly. I was horribly paid. And I remember talking to my colleagues, and everybody was, saying, I don't understand why they barely pay me a living wage when here they are doing these other things. And you have the leadership of the organization where you constantly see them parking their cars, and it's a well over six-figure car. And here I am barely making ends meet. I remember thinking, gosh, that's so interesting. Well, after I worked for them, I remember going back to and seeing some reviews about them on these websites, and everybody was saying the same thing. So I now know there is a connection. These reviews do tell me something. They may not be 100% accurate, but it still tells me what is the common consensus of several employees. And if the reviews are all saying they do not pay well, they don't pay well, they don't listen, there's issues, there's racism. These are things that tell me a lot about an institution's culture, an organization's culture. Also, look up their news, see what the news is saying about an organization. This is going to tell you, are they doing amazing stuff? I just saw on the university's website that they published a news thing about a food pantry giveaway where students were able to get food and community members were able to get food. What does that say about an organization? That clearly says they care. That's a lot when I connect my brand of kindness to their culture. And then also go look up their online profiles, see what they're tweeting about. You can tell a lot about what's important to an organization based on the things they like on social media. Everybody, including an organization, has social media these days. So just look them up. And then also through that, see if you know someone who works at that organization. Usually when I'm applying for jobs in higher education, I can find at least someone who works at a place that I'm applying for. If you know someone, or if you know someone that knows someone, that either currently or previously worked somewhere, reach out to them and ask them, what did you think about that place? Did you like working there? Did they treat you well? Was it casual? Was it formal? What was the work model? Did you work evenings? Do people work weekends? Do people work at home? Do people work in the office? A lot of this is going to help you start cementing and understanding if you match up with your brand and their culture. And then another great thing is, and I find it interesting. I've done a lot of interviews, as I mentioned before. I've interviewed lots and lots of people. And I often find it where at the end of the interview, when I say to the candidate, do you have any questions for us? And sometimes they have a few pre-written questions and it's like, oh, what is your blank? But I love the questions when they say, what is your organization's culture? Describe a perfect employee. What do you think about your organization? What are you proud of most? Where do you think the organization needs to grow? What is it like working at this organization? What does your workday look like? What do you love most about this organization? These questions are going to tell you not only about the strategic objectives of the organization. You're not asking, how I saw online that my benefits package has, I need to have my paperwork filled out by this date. Do you have a deadline for when I have to have my HR paperwork filled out? Or, I saw online that this job opportunity has a salary range of this versus this. Listen, salary is important, but also ask, who do you want to work for you? Describe a person that works at your organization. Describe the people that you want to work for your organization. And through that, you're going to find out more about their brand and their culture. And you are interviewing them just as much as they are interviewing you. And so you should start thinking, do we mesh? Because if you look and you start realizing that you don't mesh, I'm not saying don't take the job because money's money and the bills got to be paid. But then you may have to start evaluating your brand and adjusting it to match their brand and their culture. And so as we reflect on and everything that we've shared about today, hopefully you've learned about how to reflect upon your brand, how to get critical feedback on your brand, how to evolve your brand, how to be aware of where you want your brand to go, setting strategic initiative or strategic outcomes for your brand, and then matching up your brand with an organization whose culture you like. And I think the first step to that is to continue reflecting on yourself. Reflect on who you are and what motivates you. I have reflected continuously that I'm cool with working every once in a while a 50-hour work week. I am not cool working 60 to 70-hour work weeks. What motivates me is in working 12-hour days and working weekends and working late into the night. This tells me a lot of my brand and helps me understand the organizations I want to work for. Another thing is, what is your expertise? What do you want to be an expert of? If you are a new employee of an organization, you need to show them, what do you bring to the table? And part of that is understanding, what do you want to be known for? My brand at UMB has evolved to being that I'm the expert of LGBT issues and inclusion. And so that is a part of my brand. Next, get critical feedback. Don't be afraid of getting feedback. Ask for feedback. Don't just wait till your yearly review to ask and to get feedback from people you work for. Get it all the time. Ask on a weekly basis, what can I do better? What did I do anything that really rubbed you the wrong way? What do you like about working with me? What can I change? How do you think I fit in? And next, research. Research your desired workplaces and the professional culture of the field that you're getting into. I've gone to many different places, and let's use dentists, for example. And I've gone to different dental offices. And if I was applying for a job at a practice, I need to research them to find out what people think of them. Because if I go to my dentist, and honestly, my dentist only sees me once every 6 months for about 10 minutes. Literally, he just comes in afterwards and he's really wonderful. And usually after I get my teeth cleaned, he says, "Hey, Greg, nice to see you today." That tells me a lot about their culture. He comes in and sees me and he says, "Hi, Greg," using my first name. He wants me to use his first name. And so if you're going to work for somewhere, do a little bit of research on them. Find out who else knows them or has worked for them. And next, grow. Grow in your brand. Your brand is not stagnant. I once had a friend that told me, and I still, and the more I think about it, the more I realize how true it is. People change. Every 10 years, you are going to be a whole different person, whether you realize it or not. Because in 10 years, your life changes, your interests may change, your passions may change, your career may change, your job may change, your friends group may change. And with that, you are a whole different person. And so when you reflect on your brand, you have to realize that your brand is going to also change with you. So own up to your brand, allow it to grow and evolve with you. Don't let your identity and your brand grow in two different directions, because people will start noticing it. And then the final thing that is a tip that I give everybody: get a mentor. You don't have one, get one. You have one, get two. You have two, get three. Do you meet with your mentors? Have you not talked to your mentor in 10 years or 5 years? Get a mentor. Get somebody in your life that knows you, knows your passions, and knows your career, and that maybe also understands the field that you want to work in. These are really great people to help you grow and to help you reflect. So if you don't have one, I would say you need to start looking for one. And within the next month, I would be talking to them, setting up monthly coffee dates or phone calls or anything. And continue to cultivate that relationship, because as you grow, every 10 years, they're 10 years ahead of you. And it's going to help you out. So I'm going to wrap it up. I hope this is a lot of information, but I hope you've enjoyed this. And I hope this is something that you found to be interesting. Your professional and personal brand is something that is ever changing. And I think sometimes we forget about it because we're so concerned about who we are, who we think we are, that we forget to reflect on what other people perceive of us. But once you start getting that aligned, and once you start connecting your brand with where you want to go in life and who you want to work for, I promise you, it's going to make your life a whole lot better. So if you have any questions, my name is Greg Brightbill. Happy to help you. Please feel free to email me at gbrightbill@umaryland.edu. And I hope you've enjoyed this presentation, and feel free to contact me if you have anything. Thank you.